Story 1, AITA for telling my mom to shut up and accept that my wife and I aren't naming our kids the way she and dad named me and my siblings. My wife and I, both late 20s, had our first child together in June. Before he was born, there was a lot of talk about names from different family members on both sides, but the pressure to tell was on my side specifically. We didn't tell a soul what the name would be until our son was born and we had left the hospital. My parents were disappointed when we announced our son's name. My family are very traditional in how they named us. We were each named after grandparents, and that's how they feel everyone should name their kids. My wife's family don't have a tradition when it comes to naming babies. They just name them and go. No fuss or insisting on certain names. But my wife's side tends to favor more uncommon and unusual names. My wife's and my taste tends to lean a lot more to her side than to mine. Which is how we ended up choosing the name Hollis for our son. This was not something my parents liked because they expected our son to be either Jack, my dad, or Parker, my Phil. But I know they were expecting a little Jack to be born. So that added to their reaction. But they quizzed us on our choice to break tradition, and I told them it wasn't a tradition my wife's family used, and we decided we weren't going to have one either. Over the last couple of months, both parents have questioned why, have wanted to discuss other names for future babies. My mom has been the worst by far. She asked why we went with something so unlike the names we have in our family. I told her our family wasn't the only family involved, but that we also didn't take the family tastes into account. We went with what we liked. She pointed out our tastes were a lot like my eels, and I said yes, but that it wasn't about my eels and their taste, it was about my wife's and my taste. I told her I was done discussing it, and since that point I now change the topic or end the conversation when she brings it up or refuses to let it go. We had a little naming ceremony on Saturday, and my mom decided she was going to dig in her heels about the name, and she told me we'd picked a stupid name and she hated it. She wanted us to change it and name him Jack or Parker. She told me we had no business breaking a long-held tradition in our family, and there's a reason those traditions are there so foolish people can't name their babies the worst names imaginable. She also said my eels must be so smug thinking they'll have at least 2 stupidly named grandkids like they had all stupidly named kids. I lost my temper. I told her to shut up and accept that we're not naming our kids like she and dad named me and my siblings, and I told her she would need to leave and learn to be more respectful because I would not take those insults against my wife or her family lying down. My mom hated being told to shut up, and she said I had no excuse for rudeness to her face. I thought she was crazy when she was rude. AITA though? Pixie Can't Sleep says, NTA. And since she hates the name so much, it seems she hates the child attached to it by extension. Honestly, I would tell her that it's fine. Since she dislikes the name so much, she doesn't get to see the child attached to it until she calms her shit. I'd be worried about her calling him Jack behind your back and you wouldn't even know until your son can speak and tell you what she's doing. Frozen Broccoli says, NTA. If your mother wants to have a say in naming a baby, then she should have another baby. She was unnecessarily rude and disrespectful to you, your wife, your eels, and your child. I'd seriously consider going NC with her if she doesn't change her behavior, as your son will pick up on it as he grows up, and it is not acceptable to expose your family to her. Cornflakes 1989 says, NTA. It's as simple as this: if the kid isn't theirs, they don't get to decide the name. If they have a naming tradition, it doesn't matter, still not their kid, so it's not their decision. They have no right to insist the name be changed, and they shouldn't get shit talking the name, you or your wife, for picking that name and not a name they wanted you to pick. Tell them to either grow up and accept the name, or they can look forward to not seeing their grandkids. Story 2, AITA for refusing to let my Sil babysit my baby and being unwilling to hear her out. My husband and I had to be somewhere for our older child, so we asked my Mill if she could watch our 3-month-old son for a few hours. She said of course. Unfortunately, when we went to drop him off, she wasn't home, and one of my husband's sisters, Jane 21, was instead. Apparently my Mill wasn't going to be home for a bit, so Jane agreed to watch our son for some time. I immediately said no because, well, Jane believes that babies don't feel anything. She thinks that they cry for no reason and we shouldn't respond to their cries ever for whatever reason. And that not responding won't have any effect on them. She thinks that anything we do to babies during this period of their lives will have absolutely zero effect on them in the future. She will often call them mindless too. My husband called his mom and we politely explained our concerns and then hung up because we were extremely busy already, and now we had to find another babysitter as well. I figured that was it until Jane came over extremely upset and in tears, insisting that she's not a bad person and that she would never do anything to hurt any kid. She then accused me of discriminating against her because she doesn't want to have kids like everyone else in the family. I told her straight up that I don't give a crap if she wants kids of her own, but I don't like her thoughts on how to care for babies specifically. Instead of trying to understand me, she doubled down and said that her way of dealing with babies makes sense and that I'm wrong and am just extremely sensitive in nature, so of course I don't get it. She kept arguing with me about how to take care of my baby, so I just asked her to leave and she blew up on me. My husband even told her to calm down and that it's not like we're preventing her from seeing our kids altogether, but she just went "fuck you and your dumbass kids" and left. Which okay. But my mill is really annoyed with me because Jane is still very upset and I'm just wondering if I'm the like I don't think I am, especially since no one lets her babysit for the same reasons, but I'm the first person to actually say no to her face and tell her why instead of making up an excuse, and perhaps I was too harsh. Ohmsway71 says, NTA at all. You have told her why. She disagrees with how you are raising your child, so she cannot be alone with them. End of story. Different if she understood where you are coming from and agreed that she would of course do things your way, and then freaking out that you didn't trust her. She could be mad then. You would still be justified in the no, because you know how she feels, and alone, no one watching, she would test her theory. To Mill, I have a living being that cries to indicate that something is wrong. This is the only way they communicate they are unhappy. Your daughter thinks this is not true and their cries mean nothing. They should not be cared for when they are crying. The thought of my baby, in distress and being alone in that is not okay with me or your son. I am not being unreasonable. Her way of thinking is not only not the universal consensus, but completely not what I want in my child's world. I am a little shocked that you would defend her having a temper tantrum about this situation instead of telling her that of course we would not leave our child with anyone who could care less that they are crying and thinks they have no feelings. That is ridiculous. I need you on the baby's side, not on the one acting like a baby because she's wrong and doesn't like that she's wrong. Then let them be mad. This is truly ridiculous. For others to be involved and not be backing you up 100 is astonishing. Peony Pony says, NTA, you asked your mother-in-law to watch your baby for a few hours, not your sister-in-law. If your mother-in-law told you up front her plans had changed, you could have made other plans. No one is going to leave their baby with a sitter whose judgment they do not trust. This whole situation may have been avoided with one quick phone call from your mother-in-law. If she's upset, it's on her. She failed to communicate with you, not the other way around. I told her straight up that I don't give a crap if she wants kids of her own, but I don't like her thoughts on how to care for babies specifically. Instead of trying to understand me, she doubled down and said that her way of dealing with babies makes sense and that I'm wrong and am just extremely sensitive in nature, so of course I don't get it. Thanks but no thanks. No one is taking parenting advice from a childless 21-year-old who has the common sense of a doorknob. My husband even told her to calm down and that it's not like we're preventing her from seeing our kids altogether, but she just went "fuck you and your dumbass kids" and left. And she wonders why you won't let her babysit? One Believe in Magic says, NTA, the research into infant development is extensive and everything they experience is important. Tell Jane to do some actual research, and if she can find any science-based, peer-reviewed support for her view, you will at least listen. And tell Mill that you care more about your innocent child's well-being than her entitled adult child's hurty feelings. That you will slay dragons to protect your child, and that still is dangerous and any reasonable person knows it. Mill owes you an apology for planning to leave your baby with a child abuser. Story 3, AITA, for telling my coworker that I didn't enjoy my pregnancy. A new coworker started 3 months ago. Let's call her Linda. She seems pretty nice, which is why I'm really not sure about all this. At my work, we have a tradition where once a new employee successfully completes their probation, we go out for a team lunch. Nothing fancy, but something nice to celebrate. Linda passed her probation, so we went out for lunch. As we're eating, we all get to talking, and the topic of the magic of pregnancy childbirth comes up. Everyone was sharing sweet moments from their pregnancy. I enthusiastically joined in but didn't share any of my own. I think Linda noticed because she specifically turned to me and said, "Linda, you had twins, didn't you? That must have been a wonderful experience." I smiled and said something along the lines of how I wished my pregnancy and birth had been as positive an experience as theirs had been. To be clear, it was not said sarcastically at all. The truth is, I hated every moment of being pregnant. I could write a long list of all the magical symptoms I had, but I'll just give you the highlights. Horrific vivid nightmares. Hyperemesis gravidarum, severe morning sickness. Debilitating migraines. A metallic taste in my mouth. And then the birth. Honestly, I feel like anything that could go wrong but not be life-threatening did go wrong. Worst of all, due to some of the complications, I ended up being kept in hospital for a while, so I missed the first few days with my girls. It's safe to say I hated every moment of being pregnant, and every moment of labor. It was not a magical experience by any stretch of the imagination. I didn't say any of this to Linda, I just responded as I mentioned. After my reply, Linda started getting short with me. Later, I asked her privately what was going on. She snapped and told me what I said was insensitive and undermined their experiences and told me I was in a hole for it. Since then, she's sort of cooled off, and is less hostile or at least less openly hostile, but last week she invited all the girls in the team to a ladies' night. Everyone but me. Now, I don't mind so much, since ladies' nights are not really my thing, but the fact that she pointedly excluded me has made things awkward. I feel like I need to do something. I'm not really in the mood for drama. I have enough of that in my life right now. I don't need more, so I haven't confronted her about it yet. And as I said, she is otherwise a really nice person, normally pretty friendly and easygoing. So I'm left wondering if I really was in a hole. Was what I said insensitive? Did it undermine their experience? Before I ask her about it, I could use some perspective because I honestly just don't know. AITA? All 7 and we watch M-Fall says, good lord, so NTA. I would have wondered if she was pregnant with the way she responded. I also had a very miserable pregnancy and a serious life-threatening event, heart failure, so I can't relate to these stories. You weren't being sarcastic, you weren't telling these women that they sucked for having positive experiences, you didn't call them liars. You just shared your experience. She has shown that she's very petty by excluding you from a ladies' night event. All of this would make me very cautious of working on any projects with her. Good luck. Winowser name left says, Nah. I hated every minute of it too. Sure, I was excited to be having a baby, but the actual experience of pregnancy, birth and breastfeeding were incredibly unpleasant. I am very happy for people who enjoyed it, maybe even slightly jealous of them, but everyone experiences things differently and that's okay. It's not undermining anyone else's experience. If it was, then you could argue that their gushing about it is undermining the struggle and unpleasant symptoms that you had. Perhaps she is struggling with fertility or something that's made her sensitive to the subject. I would just try and avoid the topic with her and try to be friendly, as you don't know why she reacted that way and you have to work with her, so it's better to get along. TX Pete says, NTA it all. It would have been borderline if you regaled them with a horror show, but even then, that's simply just truthful. Not everything is sunshine and unicorns, and while some are ill-equipped to handle reality, that's a them problem, not a you problem. Thanks for watching, I love you. Follow Reddit Echoes for more.